Hey guys, we're going to talk about why this week might be the best time to buy right now, and prices might not go any lower. If you actually look at the price charts right now, we're closing in on 40,000 again when we dumped all the way down to 38,500. That is a bounce of 1,500 back up, and that's actually like where we were about 2 days ago. So that does mean that some of the selling pressure is actually relieving, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and that has everything to do with FTX. And it might actually be one of the sole reasons why we've actually dumped so much. And it actually doesn't actually have much to do with the ETF. FTX is going to dump their cachet anyways, regardless if we converted to the ETF or not, because they kind of have to. They owe the creditors a lot of money. They have to liquidate the assets in X amount of time period and pay back the customers that they kind of screwed. So they don't really have a choice whether to sell it or not. Whether like the Grayscale won the lawsuit or not, if it was still just a GBTC fund, they would have to sell it as well. And they sold about $1 billion, as we've said. Now, that $1 billion is a lot more effective in bringing Bitcoin down than Grayscale's other sales. Grayscale sold over $2 billion. But a lot of those sales, I've actually been hanging out on the Reddit forums and some of the crypto forums, and I've seen a lot of people like, yeah, I'm selling GBDC and just buying BlackRock and Fidelity. If Grayscale offered competitive fees, I would stay with them, but since they're not, I'm going into BlackRock and Fidelity. But here's the thing, you're basically buying one place, selling one place, and buying the other place. It's almost like wash trading. Now, there is a small net negative effect because you're buying OTC one side, selling on spot the other side. And I know they're selling spot because it's actually been Grayscale that's been moving and dumping. Over the last 2 days, on Monday, they transferred $700 million to sell on Coinbase. Tuesday, they transferred $600 million. So it's going down bit by bit. That's $1.3 billion worth of sales. Now, according to the statistics, BlackRock and Fidelity have been able to absorb about like $500 million each day. So there's still like a net negative $300 million difference, which is very, very tough to absorb for retail investors, because retail investors, some are taking profits, some are buying. The overall pressure is probably slightly positive, but nowhere near positive enough to prevent a sudden sell-off. Now, it's weird because they sell off around like 2, 3 in the morning. I've watched it both days. They don't do it in market hours, not market open, not market close, and definitely not when like China or like Japan and Korea wake up, Asia wakes up. Because 2, 3 in the morning is like 3, 4 in the afternoon over there. So they're not waking up. They've been there for most of the day by the time this stuff sells off. So I'm not exactly sure about the timing, but it's definitely been the Grayscale wallets. And I think a lot of that in the last few days, since we've been dumping, is the FTX sell-off. Like they're getting very, very close to when they actually have to pay their creditors. They've been fighting that lawsuit. And they basically, over the weekend, and like on Monday, they dumped their entire cachet of basically 22 million GBTC shares. So Grayscale has been actually like offloading that over the last couple of days. Are they done offloading that cachet? I don't know, but they should actually do all of it basically this week. And remember, the FTX liquidation hurts a lot more than regular sales, because regular sales, like most people are just like flowing into BlackRock and Fidelity. Like they're selling Grayscale, then they're buying BlackRock and Fidelity, and then BlackRock and Fidelity, either spot or OTC, has to buy that Bitcoin to supply their fund. That's not that big of a deal. Because you're just buying and selling. It's almost like wash trading, like I said. Grayscale, they're just like it's like a forced liquidation. And that does actually matter because you're selling BTC into USD and then you're not buying it back. So there is no countermeasure to that. And $1 billion in sales, even over the 4 or 5 days, will actually matter, especially if you're selling that cachet all like that basically cash all at once. And that's what they're doing. They're selling hundreds of thousands of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of an hour or half an hour. If you look at the major dumps, a lot of it happens within like 30 minutes. And that's Grayscale's wallet actually selling off. I don't really know why they're not selling OTC and they're selling on spot. My guess is they need the money really fast and they're just liquidating right now. And some people might be saying what about those other people? Why would they crash BTC 30% just to get rid of the 1% fee? It's because they're investing over the long term. So it doesn't actually matter what the price of BTC is right now that they're buying, whether it's 45 or 39, it actually makes no difference to them. They're basically buying at the same price they are actually selling for. with the two funds. So essentially, like, 1.25% difference over like a long time period, let's say 4 or 5 years, does actually make a difference. And they actually want the lower fees from the lower fee fund than Grayscale. Now, Grayscale is being stubborn. What they're doing is they're betting on the long term. And what they're saying on the long term is, I don't think these funds can actually survive with these low fees for the long term. So I'm going to guess that a lot of those funds are going to wash out and only a couple of them are going to survive. That would be a good plan because I don't think the low fees can actually sustain the funds. But the problem with that is like BlackRock and Fidelity are in, and they're going to be the ones that survive and going to overtake you. And they can raise their rates afterwards. So I don't think Grayscale strategy is really going to work because of the existence of BlackRock and Fidelity. And I think they have to lower their rates if they actually want to survive and not lose all their clients, which they are unfortunately in the process of doing. Not a very good business plan for them. So there's going to be selling pressure from Grayscale, but that's going to be flowing into BlackRock, Fidelity, and the other 9 ETFs that are actually around. The selling from FTX, no one is actually absorbing, and that's the reason we're going down. So why we're going down? Well, blame SBF again, because it is actually his fault we are going down because he screwed up FTX, and even over like a year and a half out, it's still haunting us. Now, why do I say like this week might be the bottom of the market? It's because I think like they're going to sell that entire FTX stash like this week. If they haven't sold it already. I mean, $700 million in sales on Monday, 600 this morning. That's a lot of sales. That's $1.3 billion. And BlackRock and Fidelity can only absorb like 1 billion of it. If that number keeps coming down, they'll be able to absorb all of it. And we should either bounce back really fast or we should actually start going up. Like, because right now, if you actually look at the price, we're at 40,000 exactly. And basically, that's where we were before they sold off, maybe even a little bit higher. So if they sell off again at the same amount, it's just going to go back down to like 38.5 like it did yesterday. And if they have less sell off, it's going to go down to maybe 39 and it'll bounce back even higher. So unless like MT Gox just releases their entire supply within the next 2 days, which given it might actually happen. I'm not saying that's impossible. I think we could actually reach a bottom and we could actually be bouncing back up despite all the support bands, whatever all the bears actually say. Because I think the overall market's still pretty strong. Yes, Jim Cramer is like, doesn't think Bitcoin's hit a bottom, but Jim Cramer is usually wrong about that stuff. So I wouldn't really take that to heart. And like, Peter Schiff is like bad mouthing Bitcoin, but Peter Schiff bad mouths Bitcoin regardless of what's happening. So I would definitely take that with a grain of salt as well. Other analysts like Eric Balchunas, they're pretty positive on it. They're saying like the outflows are actually slowly decreasing as the FTX stash gets sold off. And if we actually sell off like all the FTX stash this week, the selling pressure will not be nearly as great next week. And we could see a rebound as soon as next week. So that's my thoughts on the GBTC sell-off, the FTX stuff, and why like that pressure may not last all that long or will actually stop right now. And as we speak, it just hit over $40,000. The other thing is the Ethereum ETF stuff is actually heating up. Hester Pierce, Crypto Mom, just said that like Ethereum ETF will not result in a lengthy court battle. We already have the precedent with Bitcoin and Ethereum will follow the same rules. So most likely it will actually get approved. The deadline is in May. Now, what will happen with the Ethereum price? I'm not really sure how many ETFs are going to come into being and what the fees are. If it's anything like this one, Ethereum ETF, like once it gets approved, it'll cause an Ethereum and ERC20 sell-off, in my opinion. But it won't affect the rest of the market because the rest of the market doesn't really care about ERC20. So if you're holding on to Ethereum, you might want to sell out maybe a couple of weeks before the ETF comes. Now that everyone has seen what the Bitcoin ETF has done with Grayscale and everything, they're probably going to be preparing to sell the Ethereum ETF as well and buy the rumor, sell the news. And that could actually be pretty severe. So maybe like the top Ethereum to Bitcoin ratio will happen like a month, maybe a couple of weeks before the sell-off. Bitcoin should be quite a bit higher than it is now because it'll be post-halving. And like we should have actually recovered from this. So like overall, I think the ETF is good long term. and even midterm for Bitcoin. But short term, it does cause a sell-off, mainly because of the Grayscale fees and because of this FTX thing that was going to happen regardless of the ETF or not. So a lot of stuff is actually going into this. There's not enough buys to offset like the liquidation from FTX, and that's actually why we're going down. It's not just like Grayscale people exiting, because they're just exiting to other Bitcoin funds, but it's also like people that are just, it's just also like a giant glob of money that's being dumped on from a bankrupt company from like a year or two ago. So we went down about 20%. That might be the most you're going to get. So if you're not DCAing now, you should definitely start now. I mean, if you've been listening to me, you've probably been DCAing like all of last year. So you were DCAing pretty much all the way up from like 17K all the way up to like 45K. So your average is probably around like 32 or something. So you're probably still doing pretty decently right now. Anyways, like, the advice is still the same. I think I would DCA up to like as long as it's under 50K, and then once it hits like 75, 80K, I would start like piecing out a little bit at a time, depending on which coin is popping off at that time. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.